All right. Second morning home. Still very freezing out there. Still sick. I can't lay around. Quick note. As most people knew, I think, news. There was a ongoing mail strike here in Canada, and all the way up to right before Christmas. So, Sarah got behind shipping her stuff then, but then she got on top of it just before we left. And then we just came home, and I had a handful of letters from here. From people here. Cindy, I got your Christmas card. Thank you so much. And a belated Merry Christmas to you. Excuse me. And Rita, appreciate the card from you and all your kind words. Big time. Thank you so much. What else we got here? And then a very kind soul, Nick, sent $100 to go towards feeding these children here with a very kind note. We appreciate you huge. Thank you so much, Nick. Thank you. And another kind couple, Ralph and Roberta, sent $50 and a very kind, warm note and Christmas card. And a list of good, kind deeds being done around the planet. Very, very kind. Thank you all so much. Very, very appreciated. Feeling the love, right? Feeling the love. There's a lot of it here. Molly, one of our special friends, Molly, also sent something here to pass on to the ladies. And yeah, just so you know, Molly, the ladies have been very, very large voices in with what's going on. I would imagine they know, probably may even be in these books, but Molly asked me to share this book cover with everybody. All right? Sure. Murder by Decree, the Crime of Genocide in Canada. Front cover picture of Vicky Stewart, age 9, murdered at the United Church Edmonton Indian Residential School by staffer Anne Kniske, April 9th, 1958. Rest her little soul. Yeah, I'm a little not up to date exactly what's going down right now with those cases, but they are very legitimate. And it's a very frustrating topic for me. Very sad, very frustrating. Especially, I got a bunch of stickers here. Gotcha. Okay, I got them, Ollie. Oh, those are great. And I'll pass those along for sure. Anyway, it's weird. It's very weird the amount of things that go down, and no one seems to ever pay for it directly. You know what I mean? It's so bizarre. This wife charm's a little weird that way. You got money. You got money or power. You can get away with it. Isn't that weird? Anyway. Moving along on this freezing cold morning. What is it? What's Valentine's Day? It's the Heart Day today. It's the Valentine's Day. 9:30 my time. I'm not sure if I'm jet lagged or not. I can't tell because I'm sick. So it's a little... I guess possibly my clock is on 12:30 a.m. time where we were. 12:30 at night. Now, getting right into it. What am I going to do after this? Right after I do this, now I'm going to buckle down. I'm starting to hit my list of shit I got to get done. And I'm going to download a different item other than Zoom, which will enable me to have conversations with a bunch of you more smoothly and clearly. And I'm going to get on that right away as soon as I do this and get that squared away. And then people are going to be getting some emails probably today, I would imagine. So get ready. Get ready for that. What do we got here? Mark, this is red. Impact Sound is the title of this email. Hi Steve, I recently realized I've probably had an encounter in the past, the details of which may throw a light over a type of behavior and a human response. When I was younger, I enjoyed going camping. Being outdoors gave me a sense of wholeness that I seem to have lost in my old age. As with many of my encounters, this one was only discovered after listening to others' encounters. It began while camping in a national park in England. I had camped here before without incident. It was a campsite perched on a hillside in a mountainous area. The encounter began when I awoke in the early hours just before dawn. Something told me there was something wild outside the tent. I unzipped the tent and looked outside. My view of the campsite was hindered by the number of tents. I turned back to my sleeping bag and went back to sleep, only to be woken again just as dawn was breaking. It is impossible to unzip a tent quietly, so I did it quickly. As I did, I heard and felt through the ground what my mind told me was a large capstone falling from a containing dry stone wall at the edge of the campsite and falling some distance, impacting the ground and then bouncing down a slope. I think my mind pictured the stone because of the severity of the impact. A body impacting the ground from a height would not have much of a severe impact there. There would be some cushioning. The likelihood of a large capstone suddenly coming loose from a dry stone wall at the precise moment is unlikely. It's more likely that my unzipping the tent alerted something that ran and jumped and ran away, but it would have to have been something very heavy and very solidly built. I must have been too tired and disoriented to examine just what had happened. It was only later I thought carefully about it, and especially with the knowledge provided by others. Later in the morning, some of the other campers noticed food was missing. It was midsummer, and the coolest place to keep bacon and sausage was under the fly sheet. On checking my food, some of the meat was gone. Something had raided the tents for the food hidden under the fly sheets. Something heavy and solidly built. Regards, David. Okay, man. There you go. Shared. And you know what I'm going to say? You went out of your way to find this place and wrote in. You know what you saw. You know what you experienced. Oh. Thumping on the ground. I think I mentioned before. Remember, this is total full-on topic related. When I was intentionally looking for these beings when I quit guiding for a season or two, back in the, would have been, I don't know, early 2000s, 2005 or somewhere around there. And I coincidentally had ended up, my search was pointing me to this one place, which would have put me on the backside of Temple Lake, sort of, in between Temple Lake and Hope Creek, which is in between Pemberton and Goldbridge, all right? And got my old Yamaha quad, and I wound my way up from the Birkenhead Lake side up that old road. And then I wound my way up to the top, hung a right across the bridge, which is gone now, so you can't even get back into this area anymore. And I wound around the mountain, and I think I was just shy of Hope Creek. And something was beating. I thought it sounded like something was booming a boulder on the ground. Straight down below me, there was a bit of a clear cut for maybe, I think that clear cut was maybe 100 yards from my quad to the edge of the forest, the mature forest. And then just inside that timber, something was thumping the ground so loud I heard it over top of my idling quad motor. And typical, right? Typical reaction for somebody specifically looking for them. Turned my tail and ran. Got the hell out of there. And then coincidentally, right exactly where I was where the man, a man used to leave food for them there. And I spoke with a couple people that saw the Polaroids he had of those people that he brought food up there for. Crazy. And believe me, I think our friend Jeff, he got burnt a few years ago. Jeff and the man's son went looking for that photo in his old trailer, and they haven't found it yet, but they tried to find it. But every time I hear about the thump, the heavy thump on the ground, my brain always goes back to that moment. I heard that thumping on the ground over top of my quad. Excuse me. This next email is titled Mindspeak. Steve, I originally sent this email on January 1st, 2023, shortly before your phone crashed where you lost a bunch of emails. I haven't heard it read in a couple of years, so I'm sending it again in case the original was lost. I have rewritten it to add a few details. Okie dokie, here we go. Hi Steve, you can use my name. I'm George McCaw Jr. and I live in the difficult to pronounce Adirondack Mountains of northern New York. I've had the experience of receiving Mindspeak twice. The first time was around 2005. I was riding my mountain bike on a summertime snowmobile trail in the woods. I stopped to take a drink and thought of a bear that I had seen in there the year before. And suddenly, I hear these words in my head, quote, "There's more to worry about than bears here. There's mountain lions," end quote. I, of course, thought, what the F was that? I knew that it wasn't my thoughts, plus supposedly there are no mountain lions in New York. So I finished my drink and hopped on my bike. And 100 yards down the trail, I see 3 ruffed grouse milling around in the middle of the trail and flush them as I come to a stop where they were. I was curious as to what they were doing. As I stop, I see a crouched mountain lion not 6 feet from me on the right side of the trail. We looked at each other for a couple of seconds, and then it did a 180-degree turn and ran away with this big long tail waving goodbye. I was blown away by what had just happened. I realized that someone, probably my deceased dad, had warned me telepathically about that lion. Crazy. The second time was in 2008. I was away from home for the day fishing for brook trout in a few small creeks 10 miles from home. I got to the end of the one creek where it flows into the larger West Canada Creek and was trying to decide where to fish next when I heard a loud voice seemingly behind me say, "Just go home." Again I said, what the F was that? The voice was so loud and demanding that I decided to just go home. When I got home, I found my wife in a coma from severe septic shock and immediately called the ambulance. The doctor said that we were lucky that I came home when I did. I'll never doubt listening to my gut again. Thanks for what you're doing here, Steve. Don't give up your hunting tools ever. George McCaw Jr., Coldbrook, New York. Oh, you can count on that, George. I don't know one gun owner in Canada who's given up their guns, just so you all know. Not one. And that is a crazy-ass experience right there. But we all have guardians, right? I am 110% convinced of that. We all have a guardian of some sort. It sounds like they're motivating you. What an incredible experience. Now, mark this as read. Hairy Big Man, Non-Man in Kansas. WTF is the title of this email. This might be an older one. Mixed bag today. Hey Steve, I'm an ex-combat vet, served 5 tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, been wounded twice. Was in almost 14 years. When I came back home in 2011, I was stationed at Fort Leavenworth. One night in January 2012, was on guard detail at a medium-sized perimeter station, concrete walls, 2 foot thick, and a solid steel blast door. Read it. That's the one where it beat on the blast door. Why would that have been found marked as unread? I haven't a frickin' clue. Crazy story though. It's the one where Buddy went out for a smoke and was freaking out. Let me back in. Let him back in. He said he saw this massive thing out there. They saw it on the CTV screen too. It was beating on the steel door and left a dent. Greetings from America. possible saw-based situation. Dear Steve, I emailed my direct experiences a little while ago and you read them right away. Something else happened that I didn't mention then. This is recent, by the way. I apologize in advance as some of this could catch the wrong ears, but it addresses several things you've talked about more than once, and it's important stuff. There are two things I need to say to set up my story. While these ideas are generally considered out there, I know you and many of your listeners can handle it. Number one, we have the abilities of the Sabe. We never lost them. We have been reportedly convinced that we don't, and so we have bound our own hands, so to speak. I believe that. The only way to trap a superior being is to get them to trap themselves. An immense amount of effort goes into this, from cradle to grave in every facet of our lives here. A fact you have correctly observed repeatedly. Number two, remote viewing is a misnomer. There's nothing remote about it. We have the ability to leave our bodies and go wherever we want. Well, mostly anywhere, as my story will show. Some people can do this whenever they want. Some do it while the body's asleep and later think it's a dream. I guess I've fallen between these two categories, and I always have. I remembered my late father telling me about the flying dreams he had when he was a boy. One summer he got a job fixing roofs in his little town and realized that he had seen all the rooftops before in his dreams. So he knew they were not dreams at all. So here's what happened. I'm not positive that this experience was Sabe, but it was the first thought I had at the time. Since then, you've shared a couple of emails that had similar aspects, and it's got me thinking this is probably related to them. I'd recently been listening to stories about them, and sort of maybe wanting to interact with them, but it was before I found your channel. The best channel on the subject by leaps and bounds, by the way. A few months ago, I woke up for no reason around 3 a.m. and I felt I needed to go out into my kitchen. I don't normally wake up in the middle of the night and never go out to the kitchen, so this was odd. I was groggy, but looking around the room because I knew something was off. I just didn't know what. There was a little blue light about the size of a marble on the left side of the room, just over my stove. My husband had put in a couple of outlets that have little night lights on them, and I thought that it was one of those. When I scanned the other side of the room, I realized that it had been hovering over the stove in midair and didn't belong there at all. I quickly looked back and it seemed to notice me, looking at it, and disappeared completely. It all happened really fast, but it happened. I was scared, but I was very curious. Never seen orbs or anything like that before, especially not in my kitchen. I went back to bed, but my curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to go see where this thing was, or where it was from. I left the body, and zap, I got a bracket warning question mark, hand bracket, zap from head to toe that lingered for several minutes afterwards. It didn't hurt, but it was very strong, and I got the message. This has never happened before, and I've been to some pretty crazy places. I really have no idea where I went, but I definitely got that I was not supposed to go there. I couldn't even get a visual or a sense of it. Maybe it was on the other side of these portals they go in and out of, and we're not allowed or something. Well, I'm not going to try to do that again until I understand more about it. Again, not for all your viewers, but for those that get what I'm saying, thoughts and suggestions are welcome. One story you read talked about getting a zap, and many talk of lights. Really appreciate the safe place you've created. For example, how many people do you think I could send this email to that'd be willing to read it out loud to anyone? All the best. Tracy. P.S. Please don't stress in the news and the world events. When a corporation is bankrupt, it goes into what's called a receivership. The books and assets are all audited. Any employees are reassigned or laid off, etc. All of this has to happen before any of those assets can be moved over to the receiver. You're watching the very public dismantling of a bankrupted corporation down here. The Crown owned us too. Our beautiful sister Canada will be free soon as well, and you will be a very welcome and important part of our new free world. All right. Appreciate the words of encouragement. And I appreciate the email big time. And the remote viewing thing, again, I haven't cut out time yet to investigate that. I want to. I'm curious about it. I understand that it's a very real item, and it is a big topic on many different channels on the social media, right? I think Sean Ryan's had a few people on his podcast that do it. I know the military does it. It's a big thing. Who was that? That Michael Jaco, he does it, I think. I did his podcast too. Remember that? I'll get into that topic here soon, I hope, for myself. Thanks, a story, and an offer to help. Older one. Hi, Steve. Merry Christmas or Happy Holidays or whatever suits you. Hope you're doing well. I know you got a lot of mail, so I'll try to keep it brief. The story is kind of long, though. Excuse me. First off, thanks for what you're doing regarding the Sasquatch topic. As the guy who catches ample shit from his family, it's appreciated how you're opening up the legitimate conversation on an unfortunately stigmatized subject. Second, I've got a story for you. I've been interested in the topic of Bigfoot my whole life, but an experience in 2015 solidified my knowing of the creatures. I didn't visually see one, but while out elk hunting with my buddy Aaron outside Carbondale, Colorado on Mount Sopris, S-O-P-R-I-S, I believe we were followed by a group of them, beginning at my tent at around 4 a.m., and then finding ourselves surrounded about a half an hour later while navigating up an uphill trail in the pitch dark. Yeah, it would suck. A little backstory. Aaron and his dad were doing the hunting, and I was really just there to hike and camp, but keep my buddy company. Aaron's dad has bad knees, so he was mainly walking the lowland for the first day, while Aaron and I hiked about 12 miles across the backcountry ridges and valleys. I'm in pretty good shape, but he's an ultra marathoner, and he kicked my ass that day. But it was gorgeous. And as it turns out, the weather was too warm for the elk to have come down the mountain, but we had a great hike nonetheless. And full disclosure, at this point I was neck deep in the missing 411 and had read many of the standard Bigfoot books. And while not a researcher, I did consider myself a full-fledged believer, and I felt I knew more about the topic than most, so I was keeping my eyes peeled throughout our journey. Long story short, good hike, lots of predator tracks, cat pee, pretty. So we got back down to base camp around 5 or 6 p.m. and proceeded to cook dinner, have a few drinks, and play cribbage. More about this later, but I thought it weird that Aaron's dad really pressed me to sleep in the trailer with him, and not my tent. He tried multiple times to talk me out of it. Anyway, we set our alarms for 4 a.m. I planned to hike with Aaron again about half the next day and then head back to Denver. Fast forward about 7 hours later. I'm laying there in my tent after my phone vibrates me awake, and keep in mind, Aaron had cell service, but I did not. And as I'm laying there, outside my tent, I heard heavy footsteps slowly crossing by my tent, pausing, then changing direction. But they were close, and to my ears, too large to be a man. Immediately I thought it was a moose because we are thick with them here in Colorado. They're so thick, when I was camping 2 weeks ago, a cow and a calf walked up on me 10 feet away while I was taking my morning leak. So, thinking a moose, or maybe a bear, was traipsing around outside my tent, I waited there in my sleeping bag, clutching my 10mm Glock 20, hoping that my buddy and his dad would wake up in the trailer and make some noise, which they soon did because we'd all set our alarms for 4 a.m. Whatever it was, outside my tent, plodded off, and once I was sure it was gone, I unzipped my tent and yelled to Aaron to see if he'd seen what it was, and he had not. And at that point, Bigfoot had still not crossed my mind. We ate some instant oatmeal, geared up, strapped on our headlamps, and Aaron and I started up the trail again in the dark. Once up the trail, about half a mile, there was a sharp, loud series of whoops from about 15 yards to my rear. I could hardly believe it. But I knew exactly what it was, and my buddy, who ridiculed me the day before for being a believer, stopped dead in his tracks and said, "What the F was that?" He'd never admit it, but he was shit scared. I told him you wouldn't believe it. He gave a half-assed, no way. We started walking again, and not 5 seconds later, another short series of whoops, I think 3, came from about 10 yards ahead of my buddy. And again he stopped, and this time he turned to look at me and say, "What the F?" I said, "Dude, it's Bigfoot. What else do you know? What else do you know out here that sounds like that? A gorilla?" Sidebar, Aaron didn't want to believe it. And to this day, he still refuses to believe it, despite the fact that his dad, who's hunted the area for 40 years, and specifically refused to invite Aaron until he was in his 20s. Absolutely has Bigfoot stories. He won't talk about them, but mutual friends of his hunting partners say that the two absolutely have stories from back in the day. Aaron's dad keeps inviting me hunting again, but I've got little kids and I can't make it. But I do believe he'd open up about it if I'm ever able to go out with them again. Back to the story. Aaron looked at me and said, "What should we do?" I said, "Whatever you do, don't lift your gun unless it comes at us." At that point in my life, I'd listened to a fair amount of, quote, experts, end quote, and it was really the only thing I could think to say. In fact, and I don't remember doing this, I stooped down and picked up a big piece of fallen branch with leaves and wild dry sprigs still hanging on one end. So there we were, at least a half mile up an empty trail, armed with not so great headlamps, 1 rifle, 1 pistol, and a tree branch. The next thing I remember was Aaron saying, "Let's walk up to that rock up there and wait for sunrise." Up ahead there's a curve in the trail where we could just see a flat rock big enough for both of us to sit on and wait out the sun. At that point it was just starting to lighten at the edges, so we knew sunrise wasn't more than 30 minutes out. So we started walking. And after we'd taken about 10 or 15 steps further up the trail, a huge scrub oak bush to our left and downhill slope right next to us shook like a giant rattlesnake. Oh my God. The bush itself had to have been 10 by 10 in width and depth about 4 foot high, and it shook like something had taken hold of its roots, trunk, and throttled the living hell out of it. Like I said, it was on the downhill slope and was also surrounded by other thick foliage, so I could not see what had done the shaking. But all I knew was I had that tree branch hoisted up and pointed right at it like a caveman. Look, excuse me. Looking back, it must have looked ridiculous, as all get out, but I will say it's good to know that in a situation like that, my brain didn't automatically send my hand for my pistol. Otherwise, I think things could have gone very differently. Or maybe not, who knows. Aaron jumped back and had his rifle unslung, but not shouldered. And I remember thinking, I should be looking behind me. So I did that, and the mediocre beam of my black diamond headlamp showed nothing to our rear. And after that, we didn't hear anything else around us, and we made our way to the rock, where each of us watched the trail in separate directions while we had a steep embankment at our back. It was very creepy waiting there for sunrise, and Aaron refused to hear anything about what we'd heard being Bigfoot. He's a die-hard skeptic, to a very annoying degree, but we waited nonetheless. I hiked with him for another few miles until mid-morning, and then turned around to head back as planned. Maybe it was paranoia, maybe not, but I felt watched the entire way back to the trailhead. I told him to be careful and let me know when he was back at camp. Okay? Well, I was on my way back to Denver. Everything was fine for him, and though they didn't fill their tags, at least the rest of the trip was uneventful. Sorry that was kind of long. Thanks for reading. And in closing, I just want to extend an offer to help with your new... Okay. Gotcha. Older email. Okay, man. Appreciate it. Brandon, appreciate it. And you know what? I'm sure you're still hanging out here. Make sure you send this email to your buddy, all right? And you know as well as I do, oh, God. At this stage of the game, people have that reaction. I've got a friend who had the same reaction. I got a couple of friends that same reaction. And the only reason is because it scares the shit out of them. They can't handle it. That's the only reason. So there's no need to press them to win them over in a way. They're, as soon as they show that kind of fright, They're already in the club. You already want them over. They're just not going to verbally accept it. They're going to verbally express it. I mean, you know what I mean? They already came over across the line. And they really wish they hadn't, and they don't want to deal with it. That's the only thing going on. But at least if you show them, a video like this one, they'll know they aren't alone, and then maybe possibly they can crack their brains open a little more and actually look for more knowledge. Excuse me. Oh, I gotta go get some pills or something for Sarah. Holy shit. God, it sucks being sick. Sucks. What do we got here? Sasquatch encounters while hunting in North Georgia. Title of the next email. Man, quick mention though that I have held my video camera with me while I'm hiking in the dark numerous times, and I put those clips on some of these videos. And so there's many of you out there that know exactly what it's like, that last half hour of dark before the sun starts glowing. What a shitty deal have to go through that, eh? At that time of the morning in the dark? What a shitty deal. Oh, man, I gotta go back to bed, I think. Hi Steve, I first discovered your YouTube channel while looking at hunting videos and was mesmerized with your story about your wounded grizzly encounter when you had to hastily blast the grizzly when it popped out from under the deadfall you were sitting on after the dog disappeared behind it. Yeah, that was a crazy day. I've had 2 encounters in the Chattahoochee National Forest in North Georgia. The first encounter affected my hunting partner more intensely than I. We had camped out the night before our hunt and set our climbers up on trees. We had selected in some promising spots for whitetail that we scouted earlier that day. About 4:30, we made our way to our climbers, and I was set up about a quarter mile from my buddy. I was about 30 yards from a very steep ridge overlooking a narrow ridge trail where I had several encounters in the past watching black bear and whitetail using the trail that crosses in front of my fairly concealed location. My buddy was overlooking the same ridge quarter mile away, on a knoll near some thick laurel that grew up on the base of the ridge. On the base of the ridge was several funneling deer trails below the ridge that he could watch from down below. Waiting for first light is always exciting, as the woods are very calming and quiet. Any noise by an animal definitely does not go unnoticed. So, I'm enjoying the quiet serenity of the woods until about 15 minutes before first light, when I began to hear what I thought were owls hooting. But they sounded louder than owls, with more of a booming noise with much larger lung capacity than an owl. The noises then began to sound like whooping sounds, and I heard several whoops, then a brief pause of about 2 minutes, and then I heard 3 successive tree knocks. This was all coming from my buddy's area, and I was concerned, to say the least. I thought my buddy may have been effing around. Then I realized that these noises could not be duplicated by him, nor would he be so irresponsible to screw up a hunt that we spent so much time and prep to set up for. Then I became really concerned once I rationalized this, so by now I was on edge and listened intently. It began to get light enough to where I could see it was very foggy out. Actually, it was cloudy in our elevation, but I couldn't see about 30 yards away from me. Just then I got a text from my buddy that said, "Get your ass over here." I figured he'd nailed a big ass buck with his crossbow and needed my help dragging it. So immediately I replied, "Okay, I'm coming." So I get down, grab my gear, and quietly head his way. So just to let you know, we've been hunting together for 25 years, and we never talk loudly in the woods, and if we see each other, we always use hand signals or a quick whistle to alert our positions. Well, when I got close to his spot, I crested the knoll and knew he was down the hill about 80 yards from the crest. As soon as he saw me, he yelled, "Get the F over here, did you hear that shit?" I got a pissed off look on my face and I put my finger over my lips like, shh. He said, no, F that shit. Those MFers surrounded my tree. Did you hear that shit? By this time I was 20 yards away from him and I could see he was white as a ghost and quite visibly shaken up. He was freaking out and shaking like a leaf. I've never seen this man scared of anything in the woods, but I knew he was serious. And with the noises I heard, it began to sink in as my mind raced. And just then he said, quote, they were making these whooping noises and hitting trees with sticks in a triangular pattern to communicate their position. They got closer and closer and started getting louder and were throwing large rocks near my tree, but it was too dark to see them. And look, they left effing tracks. He pointed to the ground about 20 yards from the base of his tree he was in, and sure as shit, there was a set of prints in a semicircular pattern pressed deeply into the matted leafy ground. The ground was soft enough that the tracks sank about 3 inches deep in some spots. To best describe these tracks is sort of unlike most Bigfoot tracks we're used to hearing about. Instead of being unusually wide, these tracks were more narrow, like a human foot, with a pronounced heel, a narrow arch that connected to a wide ball of the foot. The big toe looked to be the size of a serving spoon, and the small toes looked like they were on one pad, possibly because heavy matted hair made them appear to be connected like one pad. This set of tracks were about 16 inches long, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. But then it all just hit me as I took it all in, and suddenly I felt overwhelmingly euphoric, almost like the air was charged with a calming agent. Take note of that. How many times has that been noted, right? And I've spoke to people directly who've had that happen while looking at one. One of them, I should say. I called my buddy down when I said, holy shit, you lucky MFer. He said, lucky? I almost shit my pants. Those effers terrorized the shit out of me. While I was mesmerized by studying the tracks, he was standing guard scanning our perimeter like one would during wartime while surrounded by the enemy. I told him, I doubt they'll be back now that it's light. And he calmed down a little bit, but not much. We began looking for tracks together because he did not want to leave my side. Crazy, because I'd never seen him act so childlike. He was really shook up, still wide-eyed and puffing on a cigarette with his hand shaking. So we scanned the area, and I found 3 other sets of tracks. One at the edge of the knoll in a semicircle pattern, and one set about 70 yards from that where it looked like the tracks just appeared. Then the last track was set really deep, as if it rested its weight on its right foot while crouching to look at the trails below the ridge while concealing itself behind a large white pine. I also found several spots where large rocks were just removed from the ground near the tracks. We also saw some older tracks on the other side of the knoll where you could easily tell one straddled a log, lifted it to the side, and foraged for grubs in the soft soil under the log. No shit. There were scratch marks in the soil still. I did not find any hair, which is what I was hoping for. But at this point, my buddy was pretty stoked and seemed excited that our suspicions of these creatures have been solidified firsthand. And by the way, the tracks range from roughly 16 to 18 inches long. Both he and I have told our stories to several hunters and DNR officers because we know what happened, and we don't give a shit if people believe us or not. We figured we'd still take a chance, and maybe we'll run into other outdoorsmen that have had similar experiences, which we have, including a Native American guy who shared a similar story and found tracks in a semicircle pattern, also which kind of freaked me out. Haha. We have had confirmation that the creatures existed up there after talking to a couple DNR officers that have seen and heard these creatures and have confirmed stories told to them by several hikers, hunters, and campers. They told us that they believe they're migrating hunters, and we happen to be in their spot this season. They actually thanked us for being brave enough to tell them what happened, so they could tell the other DNR guys to BOLO. It was refreshing to talk to these guys, that didn't treat us like crazy whack nuts because they have their own experiences, although we have shared our story with other hunters who think we flipped our frickin' lids, and they laugh it off, which we really don't care either way. I've also had another experience in the same area, and I'd be willing to share that story as well if you're interested in hearing it. And yes, you can use my name and call me if you'd like to chat. Like you have time for that, LOL. This all being said, I still don't fear going up there at night, and I won't let it spoil my fun, unless they really try hard. John Wintersgill. Okay, John, I got your phone number, and I am marking this as look into, and we will be getting hold of you, alright? Whoops, look into. And I wonder if those DNR guys are hanging on the channel. I'll bet they are. I'll bet there's a whole bunch of DNR guys from the States hanging on this channel. Maybe you guys want to email in instead of just sitting there lurking in the background. Maybe. And there you go. Welcome to the club, right? Welcome to the club, boys. Really appreciate that email. We'll be getting a hold of you. Crawling Sasquatch, question mark? Stumbled across your channel a few months ago while watching Sasquatch videos about the 1967 Patterson footage. I've seen very little reason to disbelieve any of the stories I've heard or read since I became aware of the creature's existence in the late 70s. Less the silly tabloid type stories. Around 2000. Excuse me. I became re-interested after reading most every report posted on the BF page site and becoming aware of some of the signature behavior patterns in those reports and the field recordings of the vocalizations. I'm a musician and have driven extensively through every state in the lower 48 since 2001. And during these travels, I've always watched out for any animals, really, as I've always been an animal watcher. I've especially watched out for Sasquatches, even more so since I've gotten a better idea of where and when to look out for them. During the past 18 years of travel, I never saw any sign of any Sasquatch along any of the country's highways and back roads. Or so I thought, I guess. After watching the video published on November 28, 2019, about the pastor from the East Coast seeing one crawl away like an insect, I started reading about the similar encounters regarding that particular movement/motion. Reason being, question mark? Yeah, it's a real creepy described movement, right? I think I've seen it sort of once myself. On April 26, 2011, I played a gig in Arcata, California. After loadout, we left the venue after midnight and headed north up the 101 for the 10-plus hour drive to Seattle for a show the next night. After traveling a short while, I saw something really dark/black in color cross the road less than 300 feet in front of me, really low to the ground and moving really fast and stealthily. The only thing that came to mind was a black panther or some kind of large black cat, the size of a large tiger or lion, because it reminded me of how a cat moved while stalking prey. But this thing was friggin' moving. I was thinking, what would a black panther or a really large cat be doing around here? I guess maybe a mountain lion, but this was way larger and dark/black. I'm not really sure where exactly it was. Just along that stretch north of Arcata, where the road is curvy in the redwoods, and was as we were close to cresting an incline. Anyway, I've always thought it was really strange and couldn't really place what it was, and I definitely wasn't thinking it was a Sasquatch at all. Well, until I saw your video. Maybe it was, or maybe it wasn't. Either way, I've heard a few things in rural areas. I live in northeast Florida, and I know a few secondhand stories through friends as well. And I'm with you on the people are mistaken, hallucinating, etc. Because if that was the case, people would be seeing all sorts of flying purple people eaters. But they're not. People are seeing very specific types of creatures, period. Kind of like all those sailors seeing various mythical sea creatures over the past few hundred years out at sea. They all can't be mistaken and having hallucinations. I think the vast majority of people who have a problem with accepting that people are in reality having these experiences are civilization dwellers who think mankind has everything figured out already. Anyway, I really enjoy your stories and your attitude. Keep up the good work. Sincerely, Daryl. I will, Daryl. I promise that. Appreciate that email in, man. Yeah. There's all sorts of flavors of humans. So many flavors, different flavors of human brains, too, isn't there? It's a crazy lifetime, this one. So crazy. I'm going to read one more, then I can't do it anymore. I gotta go. I just gotta go sit down for a bit. Oh man, I hate being sick. Hate it. Mystery Encounter is the title of this email. Hey Steve, been watching your videos on YouTube for the past several months, and it jogged my memory about an incident that happened approximately 40 years ago. There were two carloads of us heading down to northwest Arkansas from the Kansas City area to canoe the Buffalo National River. We were traveling at night, planning to be on the water the next morning, and had gotten ourselves completely lost trying to find our campsite / put-in point. So, it was around 2 or 3 in the morning on a dirt road somewhere in the Boston Mountains, and we'd stopped both vehicles to look at a map spread out on the hood of my 73 442, armed with nothing but a flashlight. Pretty sure it's safe to say we were all inebriated one way or the other. A bunch of city kids, 6 of us I think, getting out of town to experience the great outdoors for a few days of camping / canoeing. Well, we're looking at this map and nobody could make an intelligent decision as to keep going or to turn around. Go back the way we came till we could find a location that was on the map. And then we heard the howl / growl. Whatever made that noise sounded like something big. Really big. Everyone froze and we all simultaneously said, "What the F was that?" Now, I've watched your videos and a few others regarding Bigfoot encounters, and the thing that brought this memory back into my head was hearing people talk about getting rocks thrown at them. At first, I thought this had to be a black bear. Not knowing what a bear really sounds like, I figured it was the only thing big enough to match that howling growl. But then the rocks started flying. That put the fear of God in us, and it was, quote, "just get in the effing car and go," end quote. Whatever it was, it wanted us gone. We were happy to oblige. We pretty much laughed the experience off, and like I said, we definitely weren't sober. And the trip concluded without another incident. The only thing that bothered us was, what the F kind of animal throws rocks at people? Right? Wonder how many people have wondered that back in the day and never spoke of it again. We never saw whatever made that noise and threw the rocks. And over time, no one brought it up again. I plan to mention it to the 2 guys that I still have contact with sometime in the near future, but I'm not going to suggest what I think it may have been. Curious what their recollection is, or if they remember it at all. Oh, I'll bet you somebody does. For sure. That's my story. A mystery encounter that's been put back into my thoughts from seeing your videos. I never believed in a Bigfoot being actually existing. But the more I think about it, the more I wonder what the hell was that thing we crossed paths with. Anyway, enjoy your postings, both Bigfoot and hunting. Keep up the good work. Stephen Alt, Independence, Missouri. Boom. You know what it was, my man. You know what it was. So do we. Oh boy. Holy cow. Oh, it sucks being sick. But anyway, I'm going to keep pushing forward and go inside and start organizing and getting shit done. We'll get Sarah, me or Sarah can email a whole pile of you fairly shortly. And we're going to get teed up on getting some good solid conversations going, full of knowledge sharing, alright? Fairly shortly. As long as I don't die. Kidding. Share my story at howtohunt.com. You got some serious truth that you feel is going to help the people, you can share it through me if you want. All right? Or even if it's just going to help you. Get it to me. And we'll get on it. I'll be back tomorrow.